Hey, what's up? My name's Samuel Leeds, and in this video, I want to talk to you about McDonald's and how they make their money from real estate. They make their money from property, not from selling hamburgers and fries. Now, you may already know this. You may think, yeah, I've heard this before. I've heard that McDonald's are actually property developers and they make their money from real estate, but you just don't know how it works, what the business actually looks like. Maybe you didn't know it. Maybe you thought that McDonald's actually made their money from selling food, in which case you were entirely wrong, and they are actually property developers. They are real estate investors. So I'm going to explain in this video exactly how that works, what their business model is, and how clever and smart their business model is as well. Hopefully it will inspire you, it will educate you, but please do me a massive favor, smash the like button. I spend a lot of time researching things like this, all around property, business, investment. I do a YouTube video every single day, so like the video, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell on. So, McDonald's, what do? I hope you liked the video, by the way. What they do is very, very smart. They do not, like most restaurants do this. Most restaurants will buy a building, okay? They'll buy a restaurant, and then they'll move into the restaurant, and then they'll sell food and drinks, and they'll make their money from food and drinks, and all that money that they make, they'll put towards paying the mortgage or paying the rent, paying the bills, and whatever's left is profit, and that is how most restaurants make their money. Simple. They're in the restaurant business. They're in the food business. Now, some restaurants will lease their buildings, and then they'll just pay the rent. Others will own their buildings and they'll pay the mortgage payments. Just depends on the restaurant and how cash rich they are. What McDonald's do is entirely different. What McDonald's do is they buy a piece of land and then they build their buildings. Why do they do that? Why do they build instead of buying an existing restaurant? Well, the reason that they do that is because if you actually look at the McDonald's buildings, you can tell, I mean, they look nice. From going to have a quick hamburger perspective, it's perfect. But from a build point of view, it's very cheap. It's plasticky, it's bright, it's cheap. They're not building luxury restaurants. They're not building luxury homes. They're building I don't like to say cheap and tacky because it's not tacky, but I mean, it's certainly, you wouldn't take your wife out on a date, would you, to McDonald's? Why? Because it's plasticky, it's cheap. So they buy a piece of land, probably cheap because they're buying in bulk. They build these cheap plasticky restaurants, and then what they do is instead of running it as a restaurant, they find a franchisee. So they find somebody and they sell the franchisee on the idea of coming and being a business owner. The franchisee will come on and they'll run the business and they'll become McDonald's, but the franchisee will pay McDonald's what? Not just royalties, they'll pay them rent. And they only allow franchisees that can fix the contract for 20 years. So what does that do to the price of the building? If they build a cheap little McDonald's building, I don't know how much it will cost. Probably peanuts. Also, have you seen how fast they're constructed? Suddenly, it's just like, woof, overnight there's a new McDonald's. It's not like, oh, we're building this for 6-12 months. It's just there in 3 days. It's because of how it's built. Cheap, fast, just like the food, right? Cheap, fast. So they will then get a tenant, a franchisee, put them into the building, and then the tenant will start paying McDonald's rent. Now that's great from McDonald's point of view because effectively they've just bought a really cheap building and now got a really high paying tenant fixed for 20 years. Boom, ka-ching! But here's the real win for McDonald's. The real win is commercial properties, i.e. a property that's used for a business or a restaurant or offices. The commercial buildings are valued based on their rent. So the buildings, not only have they got rent coming in now for 20 years, but suddenly the value of the building because of the rent is pushed up. So suddenly they've built this little cheap building, this little cheap restaurant. McDonald's aren't responsible for the interiors. They don't kit it out. They don't maintain it. They just build the building in like 3 days or something, and then whack a tenant in over 20 years, The building shoots up in value, so they just got rich. But on top of the equity that they've made in the building, they've got a tenant paying them for 20 years. And after 20 years, what happens? The building has gone up in value even more because McDonald's know that real estate holds its value more than cheeseburgers do and restaurants. So that's how they get rich. Now, is what they're doing ethical? Sure, it's ethical. It's not unethical, but they're unashamed about it as well. They will tell you, the CEOs of McDonald's, even Ray Kroc, he's not a crook. Ray Kroc says they're in the real estate business. And Ray Kroc figured this out very early. And if you've not watched the movie, I would highly recommend watching the McDonald's movie. It's called The Founder. And Ray Kroc's face when he realizes that he's in the real estate business.
Is there a problem?
A big one. You don't seem to realize what business you're in. You're not in the burger business. You're in the real estate business.
He takes over the business from the brothers. He scales it massive. They are turning over tens and tens of billions of pounds every single year. And what you'll notice is a very tiny percentage of that, of the profit for McDonald's, is coming from food. Also, their buildings, nearly all of them, they franchise them out. 93% of McDonald's, so every time you drive past a McDonald's, there's a 93% chance that that is not operated by McDonald's, it's operated by a franchisee. It's still McDonald's, but it's not the McDonald's owners. And they're even disappointed. They're like, we want it to be more. Their goal is to have 95% of the McDonald's branches operated by franchisees because they have no interest in making money from the food. They only have interest in making money from the real estate because McDonald's know that true wealth is in real estate. And it's so interesting that a lot of other companies that you might think are making their money in one way. I've got a really good friend of mine who is in the car business, and he's a billionaire and he sells cars. Very, very, very successful. And after having a conversation with him, guess what? He said that 80% of his wealth is also in real estate. It's incredible. You do not realize this until you start following the money and digging. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to learn more about real estate and how you can make money in real estate, then I do run free property investment education courses. I'll leave a link in the description below, and I hope to see you in person where I can help you set up your own real estate company, even if you're starting with very, very little money. Like if you watch the movie, Ray Kroc started with very, very little money, but it was how he was smart and how he knew how to negotiate a deal, which is what made him successful. And guess what? I did the same thing too, not on his level, but I'm a multi-millionaire, and you can do the same thing as well. Hit the link in the description. Let's get started. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time.